Good afternoon, students. Today we will be talking about the practical demo experiment, and this practical is only for demonstration purpose. You need not do. Once you people come back, we will just show you the color that we get and how we need to measure. So today's topic will be estimation of serum calcium and phosphorus and its clinical interpretation. Now, I'll put forward one question to all of you. So, can anyone tell me? Serum calcium is very important in a newborn child. Why? What could be the manifestation in a newborn child if the serum calcium is low? What could happen to the newborn child? Why so important parameter in the clinical setup, especially in emergency, especially in the pediatric ward, especially in the newborn care? Why is that so important? Can anyone text me the answer? What could happen to the newborn baby if it is, having very less calcium levels in its body, and there is a severe deficiency of calcium? What could happen to the newborn baby? Anyone can answer me this question? You can WhatsApp me. Are you able to get my point? Someone text me yes in the WhatsApp. What could be the clinical manifestation? Many times you would have noticed this particular problem, especially people who are in the village areas, whose delivery will be conducted in the home by the dais that they are available in the rural setups. And anyway, delivery they have managed, and suddenly they notice that the child is throwing fits or convulsions. So what could be the reason? Whenever a child, newborn child, born with the fits or convulsions, two things, important things at your biochemistry level that you should remember is they have to check for the fasting or random blood sugar, because maybe the baby is born to the diabetic mother. It is a huge baby, macrosomic baby, weighing about 4 kgs and throwing fits or convulsions at the time of birth. But one of the possibility could be the hypoglycemic induced convulsions, and the other could be hypocalcemia. These are the two things that needs to be remembered. And so the serum calcium, decrease in the serum calcium or deficiency of serum calcium can cause convulsions as well. Now, so estimation of serum calcium or urine calcium is done at the laboratory using a method called Arsenazo 3 method. So the type of sample, usually calcium estimation is advised for serum as well as for the urine. Whenever you are collecting the blood sample for the serum calcium or urine calcium estimation, no anticoagulants can be used other than heparin. Heparin could be used as an anticoagulant. Suppose if you are going to collect the blood in the EDTA tube, which is a purple or a pink colored topper tube, what could happen? EDTA will cause the chelation of calcium and you are going to get the wrong results. That's the reason only heparin as an anticoagulant you can use for the estimation of serum calcium or urinary calcium levels. The other available methods in the market are OCPC method, Trindus method, and atomic absorption spectrophotometry method, flame photometer, and ion selective electrode. These are the other methods that are available for the estimation of the calcium, that is OCPC, Trindus method, atomic absorption spectrophotometry, flame photometry and ion selective electrode. Already you have studied in your demo practicals, and you have studied the principle of these techniques, and you know the procedure and you know the applications of these instruments as well. Now, what is the principle of this method? The calcium is going to combine specifically with Arsenazo 3 at the neutral pH to form blue-purple colored complex. The intensity of the color produced is directly proportional to the amount of the concentration of the substance present in the sample. And what is this Arsenazo 3? It is nothing but 1,8-dihydroxy 3,6-disulfo 2,7-naphthalene. Till this product we call it as azo, and dibenzene arsenic acid. So this is called Arsenazo method. The portion up to 1,8-dihydroxy 3,6-disulfo 2,7-naphthalene bis, up to this it is called as azo, and dibenzene arsenic acid. It is called arsinoso 3 method. The reagents are, it is composed of arsinoso 3 reagent and calcium standard. Standard is having concentration of 10 milligram per 100 ml. And the procedure is blank. You take 3 test tubes, label them as blank, standard and test as a sample. And you go to pipette 25 microliters of distilled water into blank and 25 microliters of the calcium standard, which is provided on the the bottle, which is labeled as 10 milligram per deciliter, and you got to pipette 25 microliters of the serum which you have collected in the heparinized sample, and for all the 3 test tubes you got to mix 1000 microliters of reagent or 1 ml of the reagent. Once you do this, you do with the pipetting job, then you're going to mix the sample very well and going to incubate at the room temperature itself for the 5 minutes, and you're going to measure the absorbance. So at 630 nanometers, the range is 620 to 650 nanometers. You can use even 650 nanometer as well. The serum concentration is given by the formula, the absorbance of the test, that is sample, divided by the absorbance of the standard multiplied by 100, which is the concentration of the standard. And when you are calculating urinary concentration of the calcium levels, and most of the time in a clinical setup we do get a cases with renal failure and nephrolithiasis, especially the patient with nephrolithiasis, so and even metabolic acidosis, so they do suggest for 24-hour urine calcium estimation. In that case, your urine calcium concentration could be calculated with the same formula, but there is little change about the volume of the urine. The OD of the sample divided by OD of standard multiplied by 10, which is the concentration of the standard, multiplied by volume of the urine. Suppose the patient is excreting around 800 ml of urine in 24 hours because of the renal failure, you can multiply with the 800 multiplied by the 2. So this is how you are going to do the calculation for the urine concentration. That is OD of the sample divided by OD of standard multiplied by 10 into volume of the urine that is excreted in the 24 hours multiplied by 2. I'm going to calculate 24-hour urine. Can anyone please explain me, or you can message me? What is the preservative that you want to use for collecting the urine sample for calcium estimation? You can use dilute hydrochloric acid or diluted sulfuric acid as well. Even boric acid is advisable, and you can start advising the patient today at 8 a.m. you start collecting the sample till tomorrow at 8 a.m. So the first sample which at 8 a.m. Which you are going to collect it, you are going to discard it, and from the second sample you are going to include into your urinary container, and the next day at 8 o'clock exactly, at 8 a.m. exactly, you are going to again ask the patient to pass urine, and you're going to include it in the sample that forms the 24-hour urine, and the preservative as well. And coming to the linearity, with using arsinoso 3 method you can calculate serum calcium up to 16 milligram per deciliter. What if the patient has got 20 mg concentration in his body? What are going to do? The machine is going linearity of 16 only. The machine cannot detect above 16. What will you do in that case? What technique you are going to use? Now I don't have any other new instrument with me which has got more linearity. Neither I have any other alternative lab to go and but the patient has got more than 16 calcium concentration in his body. How are you going to do that? And with the same sample I want to estimate. So how will you do that? Anyone can answer me this question? What are you going to do in that situation? What are you going to do? No one is answering anything. So the class should be interactive. If you do not interact, then what's the point? What are you going to do if the sample concentration is around 20 mg per deciliter, but the instrument doesn't have the capacity to show more than 16? Linearity means the maximum concentration of the particular analyte that could be measured by the particular instrument. And if it is dilute the sample, make it 1:2 ratio, then you multiply with the dilution factor, that's it. And the reference range for serum calcium is 8.5 to 10.5, but most of the the older literature books are saying 9 to 11. You can keep both the values in your mind, 8.5 to 10.5 milligram per deciliter as well as 9 to 11 milligram per deciliter. And urinary calcium excretion for 24 hours in a day is 0.1 gram to 0.3 grams or 100 to 300 milligram per 24 hours. Now clinical interpretation part, we'll discuss about that. Normally the serum calcium balance is maintained with the help of 3 important things. Can anyone please tell me which are the 3 important components or the hormones that plays an important role in the regulation of serum calcium level? Can anyone please tell me? You can text me the answer. Which are the three hormones playing an important role in the maintenance of serum calcium balance? It's about 9 to 11 or 8.5 to 10.5 milligram per deciliter. So it is parathyroid hormone, calcitonin and vitamin D. Okay, vitamin D and parathyroid hormone have got a capacity to increase the serum calcium level whenever there is a dip in a drop in serum calcium. The opposite action is performed with the calcitonin level whenever there is a high values, and it has got an opposite effect compared to the vitamin D and parathyroid hormone. So this is the antagonistic hormone, and these are the two which are going to increase the blood serum calcium levels. It's your parathyroid hormone and calcitriol. Now discussing about the hypocalcemia and hypocalcemia, clinical interpretation part of the serum calcium. One end you have got hypocalcemia, and the other hand you have got a hypercalcemia. So whenever the some concentration is below the lower limit of the normal range, that's about less than 8.5 milligram per deciliter, the condition we call it as hypocalcemia. So please remember the definition. Whenever the serum concentration of calcium is below the lower limit of the normal range for the serum calcium, which is about 8.5 to 10.5 milligram per deciliter, we call it as hypocalcemia. Now you have to tell me what are the causes of hypocalcemia. One by one, you please take one paper and pen, write it down, and one of you can post me. I'm giving you 3 minutes time. You please write down. So what are the causes of hypocalcemia? Let's discuss now. Let me see what all answers you have put. What about A batch? Why are you not responding? You guys, they are not. A batch, no answers. Calcitonin, vitamin D, PTH. What is this? Now, what are the causes? I'm asking. You know that the vitamin D or the calcitriol or the parathyroid hormone, they are going to increase the serum calcium level. Any problem at this hormone level, what can happen? So, a patient suffering from vitamin D deficiency or calcitriol deficiency can have decreased serum calcium levels. Number 2, hypoparathyroidism. What is the function of parathyroid hormone? It is to increase the serum calcium level. But whenever the parathyroid hormone levels are going to be reduced, so there will be serum decrease in the serum calcium. That condition we call it as hypoparathyroidism. So what could be the surgical cause for the that is hypoparathyroid? The surgical removal of parathyroid glands can be the one of the reason for hypoparathyroidism, right? That's the most common reason in fact. So as a part of thyroid, so sometimes there is a chance that the parathyroid glands are also removed because of the metastasis, because of which the patient can develop secondary hypoparathyroidism. There is something called pseudo hypoparathyroidism that could also result in, that condition can also result in hypocalcemia. And a patient suffering from the renal failure, that is chronic kidney disease leading to the stage 4, stage 5 CKD we call it as. So wherein the estimated GFR is going to fall less than 15 ml. Using Cockcroft-Gault equation. Okay, so the renal failure is diagnosed based on the eGFR estimation, that is estimated glomerular filtration rate. Please go back and read again renal function test properly, then only you will be able to understand. So that's a renal failure, another cause for the hypocalcemia. And the malnutrition, most commonly in Indian setup, especially in the below poverty line people, we do come across malnutrition because they don't have money to buy even milk as well. So it could be the reason for hypocalcemia would be the malnutrition and Any other, suppose if there is any defect in the intestines, that's called intestinal malabsorption, could also lead to hypocalcemia. So these are the important causes for hypocalcemia. Now, can anyone tell me at your anatomy level, at your biochemistry level, how could you clinically elicit this hypocalcemia, which we have already discussed? There are two signs which are very important to say that the patient is suffering from hypocalcemia. Sometimes you would have seen abnormal movements of the lips and abnormal movement of lips and angle of mouth and the tongue, sometimes even fingers and sometimes feet. We call it as carpal spasm or pedal spasm. So these are some of the visible signs of hypocalcemia. Other than this, there are two important signs that could elicit in a patient to diagnose hypocalcemia. Can anyone please tell me? We have already discussed about this, I guess, in the previous classes. The tetany is nothing but hypocalcemia, we call it as tetany. Then I am asking about the two signs that could be elicited in a patient suffering from severe hypocalcemia. You can remember the signs of hypocalcemia with the mnemonic CAT, CAT, CAT. C for carpal spasms, and A for arrhythmias, and T for tetany. So these are the three important aspects with respect to the hypocalcemia. There are two signs. They are called as Trouscher sign and Chvostek sign. What is Trouscher sign? When you take a the sphygmomanometer blood cup, you have to tie it above the cubital fossa, and you're going to raise the blood pressure slightly above the, suppose the patient has a systolic blood pressure of 120 millimeters of mercury, you're going to raise it to 140, slightly above the systolic blood pressure of the particular patient. And when you raise the blood pressure to above the systolic blood pressure, you can see that on the same side the patient will have carpal and pedal spasms. There's spasm of the hands as well as the feet. That we call it as Trouscher sign. And what is Chvostek sign? Chvostek sign, whenever you're going to tap the facial nerve, the location will be about 2 centimeters away from the anterior to the external auditory meatus. On the same side, when you're going to tap it, suppose you're going to do it on the right side, right facial nerve, you can see there is a spasm of the muscles supplied by the facial nerve on the same side of the face on which you are doing the tapping. Suppose you are going to do it on the right side of the face, there will be spasm on the ipsilateral side of the face. That we call it as Chvostek sign. So these are the two signs that are important for eliciting or diagnosing the tetany, and that is hypocalcemia. This Chvostek sign and Trouscher sign. Please do remember about this Chvostek sign to elicit the carpopedal spasm, the spasms of the facial nerve in the face on the ipsilateral side, which is about when you're going to tap the facial nerve 2 centimeter anterior to the external auditory meatus, there is a ipsilateral contraction or the spasm of the face, the facial muscle supplied by the nerve. And Trouscher sign, you got to tie the blood pressure cuff, and you got to raise the blood pressure of systolic blood pressure slightly above the SBP and the systolic blood pressure. You can see that the following ways the patient is going to develop the spasms of the hands and feet, that we call it carpopedal spasms. So these are two important, and we're going to definitely want to say that yes, the patient has got a hypocalcemia. When you're going to do it with the lab serum calcium estimation, going to have a decreased serum calcium levels. Other than that, what is an important clinical diagnosis that you're going to make apart from the physical examination? So you're going to do something called ECG, right, electrocardiogram, and you're going to observe for the sum of the waves. What's going to happen? What's the abnormality that you're going to get on the ECG when the patient is having hypocalcemia? Can anyone please tell me the answer for this question? So there will be prolongation of the QT. QT interval is going to be prolonged. That's the intermittent prolongation of QT interval. Okay, so you know about the ECG, normal ECG that you would read in the physiology, what is P wave, Q, R, S, T, all that, right? So the QT interval prolongation is the main important finding. The prolongation of the intermittent prolongation of the QT interval is one of the important finding that you're going to get it in a patient suffering from hypocalcemia, right? So that's about the ECG finding. And how are you going to manage this patient? You're going to treat the patient with the calcium gluconate or calcium chloride in the severe cases. About 10% the solution is given in the form of calcium gluconate, and that's everywhere there's biochemistry. Whenever the treatment comes, diagnosis comes, you cannot escape from the biochemistry. One who is very good in biochemistry could do very well your clinical practice as well as the future subjects as well. So please, these molecular subject is very important. I guess you can understand what is the role of biochemistry in emergency department now, without which the diagnosis cannot be framed, without which the treatment cannot be outlined properly. So that's the importance of this particular minerals, right? So the treatment, suppose you want to treat the patient at home. Once you are given calcium gluconate at the OPD basis and you have discharged the patient, what are you going to advise further? Can anyone text me the answer for the long-term therapy? What are you going to do? How do you manage hypocalcemia at home? Can anyone please text me the answer? You are going to give calcium tablets. That's all. Calcium along with vitamin D supplementation you are going to give to the patients. That's how you are going to manage at your home level. So that's about the hypocalcemia. Now coming to the other entity is called as hypercalcemia. Hypercalcemia, the concentration of the serum calcium above the upper limit of the normal range, we call it as hypercalcemia. It can go up to 12, 13, 14, etc. Okay, so that we call it as hypercalcemia. And can anyone outline the causes for hypercalcemia? Exactly the opposite causes of hypocalcemia. One of the another important cause for the hypocalcemia, especially the patients who are on calcium channel blockers, can also result in the patients who are being treated with the calcium channel blockers can also have chances to develop hypocalcemia, right? And coming to the causes of hypercalcemia, can anyone please tell me, patient who are on excessive vitamin D supplementation, and the patient was suffering from primary hyperparathyroidism or secondary hyperparathyroidism, and certain cancers like lung cancer, the small cell carcinoma of the lung, oat cell carcinoma of the lung, and sarcoidosis, patients suffering from sarcoidosis can also, any malignancy can result in, that is called tumor lysis syndrome. There's another condition called tumor lysis syndrome can also result in hypercalcemia. So these are the causes of hypercalcemia is more common as per the literature. When I was searching in the literature, I found that the hypercalcemia is more common compared to the hypocalcemia. That's what, especially in the adult population. So it's going to be more common, and please do remember all these causes what I have told you right now. So that's why vitamin D supplementation, even though the patient is having a deficiency of vitamin D, some of the patients go on taking, we would have given some duration to take, maybe around 2 months, 3 months, depending upon their vitamin D status in the serum. But sometimes so they keep on continuing, since they feel very good with vitamin D, they feel like continuing the tablet for more and more time, maybe 1 year, 2 years. In that case, they are going to have severe hypercalcemia and nephrolithiasis, and the patient is going to land up with so many renal complications. That's the reason constant monitoring, just to once you treat the patient with vitamin D and calcium, and you don't advise them, please you have to undergo the test after 1 month or 2 months, depending upon your how you are managing the patient, depending upon their calcium and the vitamin D status in the lab reports. You have to advise them after 2 months you have to come and get it checked up. Otherwise unlimitedly if they are consuming, and it carries no sense. So that is where our health practice is lacking. Serial monitoring is not there, and follow up even from the patient side also. They don't want to come since they are feeling very good with the tablet, they just want to continue whole of their life. It is not like that. They also should have motivation to come and consult a doctor and take the proper advice. Otherwise it's very difficult to, otherwise patient will end up in all the sort of complications. So from both the end there should be active participation, motivation, even doctor-patient relationship in that case is very important. It plays a vital role. So that's about the hypercalcemia, and moving on to the estimation of serum phosphorus. So we are going to, it's also a demonstration practicals, you need not perform it. We are going to do it with ammonium molybdate ultraviolet method, and the type of sample we are going to use will be serum or urine, heparinized plasma or raw urine. Other methods for serum phosphorus estimation is one of the oldest method which is there in your old literature, Fiske-Subbarao method. because he was the one who discovered ATP, and he was an Indian scientist, right? The principle of this method is inorganic phosphorus is going to combine with ammonium molybdate in presence of a strong acid to form phosphomolybdate. The formation of reduced phosphomolybdate is measured at, that's the reason it is called UV method. So because the measurement is done at 340 nanometer, going to be directly proportional to the concentration of inorganic phosphorus going to present in the sample. The reagents required are R1, that is ammonium molybdate along with sulfuric acid, and the phosphorus standard, which is available as 5 milligram per deciliter. And the procedure, take 3 test tubes, label them as blank standard, and the test going to pipette 0.01 ml of distilled water into the blank, and 0.01 ml of standard into the test tube labeled as S, and 0.01 ml of serum that is labeled into the test tube labeled as T. So the working reagent will be 1 ml, and you're going to mix it and going to incubate it at room temperature for 5 minutes. I'm going to take a reading at 340 nanometers. So going to calculate the concentration by ODF test divided by ODF standard multiplied by 5. And the linearity of this method is about 20 milligram per deciliter, above which you are going to do dilution of the sample. And the serum reference range is about 2.5 to 5 mg per dl. In adults, in children it's going to be slightly higher because of the active bone growth that you're going to have, and 4 to 6.5 milligram per deciliter, and the urine concentration is going to be around 300 to 1000 or 1 gram for 24 hours. And the clinical interpretation, you're going to get increased levels of serum phosphorus, especially in a patient suffering from hypoparathyroidism, similar to that of exactly opposite causes of hypocalcemia and hyperphosphatemia. The increased concentration, we call it as hyperphosphatemia. And causes will be hypoparathyroidism, renal failure, patient having bone metastasis. The primary of the cancer could be somewhere else, but the patient has developed bony secondaries. In that case, the patient can have that is hyperphosphatemia. And the patient suffering from the liver diseases can have increased phosphorus levels. Now, can anyone tell me what are the sources of phosphates in the body? Sources of phosphate. Can anyone tell me what are the sources of sulfur? What are the sources of phosphorus? Endogenously produced or synthesized compounds in the body, like? Can anyone tell me, please? Phosphorus sources, I am asking. Very important, without which life doesn't exist. ATP. Very, very poor batch. Don't have any answers. Protein. Which are phosphoproteins? Milk. Okay. The decreased levels of phosphorus are found in patients with vitamin D deficiency rickets, and the vitamin D deficiency causes osteomalacia in adults, so could be the reasons for decreased phosphorus levels, and hyperparathyroidism, and a patient with diabetic coma can have decreased serum phosphate levels. So these are the important causes of hyperphosphatemia and hypophosphatemia. And that ends today's class about, so all of you please read about regulation of serum calcium, and what is an important role played by the vitamin D, that is calcitriol, and parathyroid hormone and calcitonin in the regulation of serum calcium balance. And also read more about, I don't want sorries. Students, you have to be thorough now. Now it's almost 1 year is done, and we have taught almost all the topics without any, any jumping of any topics. We have almost covered everything. So in spite of this much spoon feeding, you are not answering, you are not studying. It's really shame on you guys. I do not know when you are going to do this. Anything, I don't know. Everything is left to you. Out of 75 students, I have evaluated 1 to 75 roll numbers. Only, I guess, 10 to 20 students have passed. That to just pass marks they have scored. Otherwise, most of you have failed in the theory. I don't know. Your batch will have very worst performance in your examinations. Very sorry to say this, but in spite of teaching, in spite of having regular classes, and in spite of everything, you are not at all performing well, and you are not studying, totally disoriented. You have written any answers, anything you have written in the answer sheets, which is not asked. I don't know how you have approached the question. Sometimes you have written past participle, you have written 3-4 pages. Was there any requirement to write so much? Have asked for 5 marks, you have written for 15-20 marks. It's not. If you write it that much also, you will get maximum 4 only out of 5. 4 or 4.5. We cannot give 20 for 5 marks question, right? Why did you write so much for that question and the other questions not attempted? This is a very worst performance your batch students are having. Very sorry to say this, but you have to improve, otherwise there is no point. So please read. Today itself you go back and read about calcium and phosphorus in detail in the mineral metabolism chapter. What is the RDA of the calcium, what is the RDA of phosphorus, what are the important food sources, what are the deficiency manifestations, what is the toxicity manifestations, what is the biochemical role played by these two important minerals. Please go back and read, otherwise you don't ask me any doubts in WhatsApp. We are having a group, we are doing every possible thing to make you always into the track, but still you are, from your end, response is very bad. Don't ask any doubts. This one should not be in this. As a student, you should be humble. You should try to ask questions, try to clear your doubts. You should try to develop the interest. We don't know what is going to happen tomorrow, but today you please make an effort to study. Whenever you get any doubt, post some cases in the group and start having discussions. You should do such. As a student, you should be actively involved in gaining the knowledge. This is a time to gain the knowledge. Once you pass out, once you finish your MD, you will only stick on to your own subject, and there is no much scope for gaining the knowledge that time. This is the ideal time, this is the ideal age for to gain knowledge. Today, whatever the clinical knowledge I have, it is take me granted, it is only from my MBBS knowledge I am using it. It is not because of MD knowledge. So that's why you please make your subject very strong. Keep taking interest in studying, be humble, and try to gain knowledge. So that's very important. Now I have told you the phosphorus levels. Why in renal failure serum phosphorus? You should question your brain. Start questioning yourself. Start analyzing. Why in bone metastasis there is increased phosphates? What is the reason? Try to understand why in liver diseases. Why liver disease has to contribute to hyperphosphatemia? I challenge you, maybe, out of 1 lakh, 1 or 2 people may be knowing the reason for this. So you try to analyze, you try to correlate the subject, then only you will be the good clinician tomorrow, I am telling you. So you please follow all these methods, analyze, have a habit of questioning. Why is that? Why is this like this? Then only your mind will start expanding, it's going to work well. Otherwise nothing can be done. Anyway, so I am ending the class for now. Thank you. Hello.